The next few verses could be taken as an assault on our deepest beliefs, and particularly, if you're a Buddhist, it's an assault on core Buddhist beliefs. We've already had some core Buddhist beliefs attacked, namely those to do with meditation, with the analysis of the skandhas, and the enlightenment of the Buddha. And it's going to continue. Now, there's nothing very appealing about assaults or attacks. It's like having a revolution, but not knowing what you're going to replace it with. And we don't want to end up in the situation of having a revolution and ending up in a worse state of affairs. So it's important to understand this in the context of enlightenment practice. I don't know if you've come across this before, this understanding, this term, this phrase, enlightenment practice. As far as I know, I came up with it myself. Basically, this course of videos is assuming you've already had what we could call an enlightenment experience, or what the Japanese call satori. This is what the Buddha had, not when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree in his early 30s on the night of his enlightenment. When he was sitting under that tree, what he remembered was his first enlightenment experience, which happened when he was a teenager, sitting under another tree, watching his father in the field. He realized that experience, which happened spontaneously, for what it was, and he built on that. So the Buddha was an enlightenment practitioner. He remembered his enlightenment experience after more than a decade, and saw that as the way to final liberation. And you might say, well, that was the Buddha. He'd been practicing for many lives, eons of lives previously, and it come to fruition. Well, I'm afraid if you follow that line of argument, there's no hope for you, and you might as well go off and carry on your spiritual practice for the next several eons of lifetimes, and maybe you'll get there. But the rest of us, I would say there must have been something in your life to have brought you to this point. For myself, it happened very clearly quite a while back when I was reading a little book called On Having No Head by Douglas Harding. It was just the first couple of pages of the introduction, and suddenly the penny dropped. It seemed quite unremarkable. But then I felt this incredible sense of relief, like a weight I'd been carrying for a long time without realizing it had been put down. This is one of the similes the Buddha uses to describe realization. The other thing was, I couldn't see anything beyond this. This was surely the ultimate. There cannot be anything beyond this. This is the bottom line. So in a way, it wasn't a peak experience like you might get in a state of mystical ecstasy or on a particular kind of drug experience. It wasn't a peak experience, it was a valley experience. I'd reached the bottom line. There was nothing else beyond this. This is the fundamental prop of everything. And the third thing which made me think, well, there's more to this than just my imagination, is the scriptures of India. The Buddhist and Hindu texts suddenly made perfect sense to me. So that was my enlightenment experience. I was in a state of, I suppose you could call it bliss for some time afterwards. But I think that was to do with my reaction to it rather than anything intrinsic to it. Because even after that having happened, there were still things to contend with, namely my own psychology, which I think could be fairly described as damaged. And secondly, there was the reality which we'd been educated to believe in from a very early age, the conventional or consensus reality. So these two factors which weighed heavily against my coming back to realization. Therefore, enlightenment practice, as well as remembering the realization, I work on my psychology. I map it out. I see how it sucks me down. And there's also all the ways of thinking in everyday life which also suck me into delusion. So we have to work on several fronts. We have to dismantle the structures of conventional reality. We have to dismantle our own convictions and inclinations, and we have to remember realization, come back to it. Come back to awareness. Come back to this awareness by which you are sentient, by which you are aware right now, because that underpins everything. So this is the context. It's not simply an attack or an assault. It is dismantling that which undermines our realization. So verse 23. There is nothing but thought construction and name. You seek in vain for individual signs. The skandhas are like a hairnet wherein discrimination goes on. I think I'll cover this in the next video.